best way to introduce the Frederick Douglass Foundation would be to start with kind of how I kind of came into this realm. I currently work in the California State Legislature. I'm a Deputy Chief of Staff for Assemblyman Kevin Jeffries, the best member in the California State Assembly. For those of you recording this, make sure he sees a copy of it. I'm his Deputy Chief of Staff, and I've been in the state legislature for about seven, 8 years. And it's one of the most frustrating things when you see organizations that are supposed to represent urban communities, they're supposed to represent communities of color, coming before the legislature and testifying, and saying things like, well, government jobs are the type of jobs that we need to be encouraging. The way in which to promote economic development is by growing the size of government. That what will make education work is if we simply put more money into it. There are all types of families that can be successful. You name it, item after item, there are organizations from the NAACP to the Urban League, to all of these to the so-called Black Chambers of Commerce, who come before the California legislature and they testify, and then in the community they advocate for candidates and for issues that harm urban communities, that harm communities of color. Now, I always like to look at it this way. I always talk about it this way. What's good for the black community is good for the community. What's good for African Americans is good for Americans. What's great about being a Republican is that when you understand our principles and the principles upon which our party are founded, which are very similar, by the way, with those principles upon which our nation is founded, you find that they work. You find that wherever they're instituted, at whatever level, at the school board level, at the city level, county level, state, nation, when it's instituted, when those principles are instituted, they work. And then when they're not, they don't. And so what we wanted to do here in California, what we wanted to do with the Frederick Douglass Foundation of California was we wanted to be that voice. We wanted to make sure that we were not just a political advocacy group advocating for candidates, but that we are a public policy advocacy group. That we are representing the issues that impact our communities. Economic development, free enterprise, traditional family values, quality education. These are the sorts of policies that you do not see many organizations, many African American organizations advocating for in our state legislature. You just don't see it. And so what we wanted to do was we wanted to put together an effort where we could make sure, one of the great things about being in Sacramento is I get a chance to see all the bills that are coming up. I get a chance to review them and we get a chance to talk about them. And our goal is to, one, be that public policy voice. To make sure that our positions, and not just our positions, but make sure that the correct positions, positions that will prosper our communities and prosper our state, are represented before the California State Legislature. But we don't just want to stop there. Our goal is to change the face of the California State Legislature. Our goal is to make sure that we have candidates that represent those values, to make sure that we're holding accountable those who represent those communities. You cannot say that we believe in jobs and then pass job killer bills. You cannot say that we need to take care of our children and educate our children and then side with the teachers' unions that refuse to allow reform to take place. We want to call those organizations and call those individuals out on the carpet. We want to make sure that we've got quality candidates running against those individuals in areas that may be difficult to win. I like to call them opportunity districts. They may be, or party building districts, but the thing is, it's important that we make sure that those individuals who represent those areas are held accountable, that they are called to the carpet for the positions that they take and the impact that it has on those communities. A lot of times when it comes to disease, they say that disease attacks the weakest part of the body first. Our low-income, our urban centers, our low-income communities, when you look at those communities and you look at the challenges that they are facing, those challenges are not going to stay there. Drugs did not stay in the low-income communities. Out-of-wedlock births did not stay in low-income communities. poor quality of education is not staying in low-income communities. We have got to stand up and be the first line of defense. And that's what our goal is at the Frederick Douglass Foundation, to support candidates who support our values, to assist them by helping to elevate their status and their recognition in the community, but also to help them to raise money, because we all know that running for office takes money. I mean, we've asked Congressman West to come here because we know that he's going to be one of their, if not their #1 target in Congress. We know that because he is a strong voice for the values that we hold dear, that we know work. We need to make sure that he stays there, that he stays in Congress and moves up. That's important for us. But it's also important that we recruit candidates at the local level for school board, county board of supervisors, city councils, state assembly. But it's also important, once again, that we're representing those issues in the California state legislature, that we are the voice for the voiceless. In areas where no one else will speak, where you'll see on an analysis there'll be tons of liberal organizations who've offered their position against an issue or for an issue, for the wrong side of the issue. It's important that we make sure that our community is heard. But it's also important that we make sure that the issues in those communities are heard with our public officials and with those within our party. I always like to say that we have the answer to fix this nation. All communities within this nation. The challenge that we have sometimes is our ability to communicate those values, to communicate those positions, and how they can assist in those communities. That's our goal as the Frederick Douglass Foundation, and we thank you for being here to support us as we advance that goal. We just pray that you will continue to be with us and to support us as an organization as we go forward. I'm going to make this a real short introduction to Congressman, because I know that all of you are here because you are huge fans. I will tell you that it is not easy, and I'm sure that the ones that are here will tell you, it's not easy being a black Republican. I'll tell you, one time when I was running for office, I was talking with a lady. I said, well, you know me, you know who I am. You know, I've been around, I've been active in the community. You know, are you sure? Yeah, why don't you? Yeah, you can vote for me. She's like, well, I don't know. I said, but you know the person I'm running against. I mean, she clearly doesn't represent our values with the best interest of our community. She's like, I just don't know, though. And I said, Mom, I'm your son. I share that because, the reality is that, most voters, most people share our values. Most people, if you were to take the label off of the party and to talk about the issues and the values, up and down, 9 times out of 10, they would come out on the side of Republican. They just can't bother to bring themselves to be Republicans. But I'll tell you what's even harder than being a black Republican, and that is being a black conservative. Being a black conservative candidate. Someone who is willing to be out there on the front line, someone who's willing, and if you've ever run for office, any of you who've ever run for office know that your entire family, your credibility is put on the line. Your opponents are given free license to lie about you. It is not an easy life. It is a life of sacrifice. It's a life of service. And it's a life that Congressman West has chosen to take on for this nation, for us. So without any further ado, I want to welcome to the floor Congressman Allen West.
Please, if we could give a round of applause. Now, before we get started, I want to challenge you. How many people showed up here with this? This is the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States of America.
It's in my phone.
Oh, that's, okay. Okay, you're a techie. I'm from the South. We are analog. But when we come together in forums such as this, And when you're out and about, you must have your personal weapon. And if you're a conservative, if you remember the Tea Party movement, whatever, you need to have this, which tells you why this is a constitutional republic, which is based upon the individual, their rights and freedoms, and the rule of law, which is our Constitution. Now, a lot of folks have said, you know, why are you out here? You know, it's so tough out here. You know, you're San Francisco, Pete Stark, Nancy Pelosi. Okay. Let me start by telling you a little story. On my lapel here, I wear my paratrooper wings. My Army Master Parachutist wings, and also my Navy Marine Corps Parachutist wings that I earned on a 3-year exchange assignment. And why do I do that? Because it reminds me of the legacy of paratroopers. It reminds me of the words that Major General John Jumping Gavin said. No, I'm saying Jim Gavin said, who was the commander of the 82nd Airborne Division during World War II. And he said, "Show me a man that will jump from an airplane, and I will show you a man that will fight for his country." It reminds me of those men of the 506 Parachute Infantry Regiment of the 101st, the famed Band of Brothers, who had a one-word Cherokee nickname for their unit. It was Currahee. And Currahee means stands alone. So then in December of 1944, when the 101st was surrounded by the Germans, and they were simply asked to surrender, their commander sent back that one-word response, and that response was nuts. You have to understand that you are behind enemy lines. But just the same as the men of the 82nd and the 101st on that incredible military operation called D-Day, Operation Overlord, they landed behind enemy lines. They were scattered all over the place. But the confusion that they created was so that the Germans did not know, was there a superior force? Where was this force coming from? Wherever you are, stand upon the Constitution. If you have to stand alone, you do so. But you will bring confusion to the other side because your message is better, because your message is rooted in the fundamental values of these United States of America. So I beg you, when you go out armed, go out prepared, and go out ready, no matter where you are, to stand on the truth and to stand on the principles. Now, with that being said, let's talk about what's going on in the United States of America, especially up in Washington, D.C. I'm not here to give a speech. I'm here to have a conversation with you. And the reason why I told Kevin, let's do it before we eat, because that way some of y'all will give me that ugly look saying I'm hungry. So that'll keep me from pontificating and bloviating, as Bill O'Reilly would say, for too long. But I want to hit you with the facts. And once again, you see that on one side next to my heart is the Constitution, on the other side are the facts. And I want to share these with you. On Inauguration Day, you had 12 million unemployed Americans. Today, you have 14 million. That's a change. Of 2 million.
That's a change.
The unemployment rate on Inauguration Day was 7.8%. Today, the unemployment rate nationally is 9.1%. We have had unemployment in the United States of America at or above 9% for almost 28 straight months. That's going back to the Depression era. The unemployment in the African American community, 17%. The unemployment for African American adult males, 20%. The unemployment for African American teenagers, 46%. The unemployment in the Hispanic community, 11.3%. The unemployment for veterans coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan, 11.7%. That's a change of 17% increase. Gas prices in the United States of America on Inauguration Day was $1.85 on average. Gas prices today on average, when we took these statistics on the 5th of October, $3.43 average. That's a change of an 85% increase. The federal debt in the United States of America on Inauguration Day was $10.6 trillion. The federal debt today approaching $14.7 trillion. That is a change of a 39% increase. The debt to GDP ratio in the United States of America is approaching 74%. That's an astronomical number. 47% of the debt of the United States of America is owned by foreign countries. 27% of the debt of the United States of America is owned by a Chinese country that is called China. And if you don't think them holding almost 30% of your debt affects your foreign policy and your national security strategy, I got some farmland down in South Florida that I'd be happy to sell to you. The debt per person in the United States of America on Inauguration Day was $34,731. The debt per person now in the United States of America is $47,047. That is a $12,316 increase. The misery index, as you know, that was reported last week, of being at a record number, highest it's been in 26 years, of 13. On Inauguration Day, the misery index was 7.8. That's a 65% increase. Food stamp recipients in the United States of America on Inauguration Day was 32 million. Food stamp recipients today, 45 million, a 41% increase. Health insurance premiums in the United States of America, $3,354 on Inauguration Day. Health insurance premiums in the United States today, $4,129, a 23% increase. Home values, $193,400 on Inauguration Day. Today, $172,600, an 11% decrease. U.S. global competitiveness, on Inauguration Day, we were number 1. Today, we're number 5. Americans in poverty, on Inauguration Day, 39.8 million. Today, 46.2 million. An increase of 6.4 million. And just last week, we found out 48.5% of Americans are on some form of government aid. The problem that is going on in the United States of America right now is that we are making more people victims. And as you make more people victims, then people have to be dependent. And the thing that they have to be dependent upon is a bureaucratic nanny state. And you just heard Harry Reid say last week that we want to see a growing public sector as opposed to a growing private sector. What we must be able to convey are our principles and values that tell people that as the public sector continues to grow, your prosperity will go down, but your misery will go up. Because America in 235 years, when Kevin and Tracy stand at this window and they look out across this incredible vision, that was not constructed by a public sector. That was constructed by Americans. That was constructed because we believed in Americans and their individual ability of freedom of conscience and freedom of will, which means that investment, ingenuity, and innovation has not and will never come from Washington, D.C. or Sacramento or your local governments. It comes from each and every one of you. And if we get away from understanding those basic free market and free enterprise systems, if we continue to go down the road of this, what I call the crony capitalism, where government interjects itself into the free market, and then it starts to choose the winners and the losers by way of bailouts and things of this nature. When government all of a sudden believes that it is the #1 provider of venture capital, as you know, right down the road with Solyndra is an incredible example. That is why we're going to see a private sector that suffers. If we cannot restore confidence with each and every one of you to understand that the fiscal policies, the monetary policies, the tax policies, and the regulatory policies that emanate from Washington, D.C. must promote your success, because government sets the conditions for you. It is not the other way around. But if we continue to have a tax code, such as the progressive tax code system we have in the United States of America, which lends itself to class warfare, whereby 47% of wage-earning households do not pay federal income taxes, it's just a matter of time. Because if you continue to expand this entitlement class, or this welfare state, what happens when 50% is paying for the other 50%? What happens when the producers equal the entitlement group? producers will eventually stop to produce, which is exactly why a book written in the 1950s by a woman by the name of Ayn Rand is now one of the most popular books again, Atlas Shrugged, because it talked about how what happens when government punishes people for their ingenuity, for their investment, for their innovation. They take away setting the conditions for them to be able to thrive and grow for the expansion of the nanny state. Then the producers will eventually leave and stop producing, which is the #1 thing that our good liberal friends don't understand about socialist economic theory. Because as Margaret Thatcher says, socialism works very well until you run out of other people's money. And that is eventually what will happen here in the United States of America. If we continue to have regulatory policies that do not promote a thriving small business sector in America, which is the economic engine of this great nation. Because what has happened in Washington, D.C. is that when we could not see them get things through the legislative process, being in cap and trade, being in card check, now you see the EPA doing it by regulatory fiat. You see the National Labor Relations Board doing it by regulatory fiat. Who would have ever thought that we would live in an America where a government agency full of bureaucrats would tell a private sector company where they can open up a factory in this country? That's how bad we're going down the wrong path. When you have a 35% corporate business tax rate in the United States of America, when you combine that second highest tax rate in the world with a 4 to 7% state corporate business tax rate, you're telling corporations and businesses here in America that it costs you 39 to 43% somewhat to do business in this country. You're creating the policies that make them go offshore. And then you come back and you say corporate profits are up, but they're not up here in the United States of America, so therefore corporations are bad and we should fine corporations. In the military, we call that the self-licking ice cream company. But that is exactly what we have happening. The policies that are created to force people to do a certain thing, and then you punish them and fine them for doing the thing that you just created. You know, when I see these people with this Occupy Wall Street movement and everything, hold up these signs that say end capitalism, the question we should ask them, and replace it with what? Let me look at your blue jeans and see if there's a label on it. Let me talk to Michael Moore, since he says capitalism has not done anything for him, and ask him, when was the last time he allowed people to go look at one of his movies for free? When you have Russell Simmons, who is going down there saying, you know, I'm one with you, I'm all into it together. Well, no one's talking about Russell Simmons being a billionaire and owning a debit card company. The hypocrisy is laughable. Just this last week, Barney Frank was on Wall Street having a fundraiser. And Barney Frank, with the Dodd-Frank bill, is really the architect of the disaster that occurred in 2008. But really understand what happened in 2008. Government got involved in the private sector. Government all of a sudden said in 1975-78 with the Community Reinvestment Act, we want everybody to have a home. Everyone has a right to have a home. That's not government's role. And then government steps in and you have a good piece of regulation such as Glass-Steagall, which has the separation between investment banks and commercial banks. They repeal that. Then government allows people to go out and securitize mortgages and sell them from bank to bank. And not even banks here in America, but banks overseas. And then government decides, well, let's create a government-backed entity called Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. And let them go out and take 60 to 65% of the mortgages in this country. Step after step after step. When government gets engaged in the private sector, eventually you're going to see something collapse. So now what do we see? A health care law that is already raising insurance premiums. A health care law that is already forcing small business owners to put people off of health care coverage, put them on part-time, or just simply lay them off. Regulations that are so punishing small businesses. When you go down to South Florida, I would like for you to drive up US Highway 1, Federal Highway, from Fort Lauderdale Airport to the northern boundary of that district and count the closed storefronts. Because we're driving people out of business. Because no one understands anymore the right and proper constitutional mandates of the federal government. A federal government Their only constitutional mandate is to create a budget. But yet we're on day 905 without the federal government having produced a budget. So how are you going to have fiscal responsibility? Can you run your home like that? No. Can anyone run their business like that? No. You have no left and right limits. You have no parameters. You have no definitive guidance. And therefore, you have a federal government that this past year, fiscal year 2011, once again, we have a $1.3 trillion deficit that follows 2 years of $1.42 trillion and $1.29 trillion. Even though revenues increased in the United States of America in fiscal year 2011 by 6.5%, we still overspent. You can zero out the entire defense budget, which is only about 19.6% of the budget of the United States of America. You will still have a $1 trillion deficit. Defense spending in 2011 went up by 1.6%. Medicare spending went up almost 7%. If we don't have people that have the courage to tackle the tough issues in our country, 62% of our federal government spending, net interest on debt, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. The other 38% is on the discretionary side. But non-defense discretionary spending in the United States of America under this president has gone up 7%. To the point where the federal government, their spending is 24% of our GDP. We have to turn this around. And the only way we're going to turn this around is with the people that I'm looking at right here. To get out and recognize that November 2012 is the decisive election for the future and the legacy of these United States of America. Now, you're right, Craig. You're looking at the person that in 10 short months, never been in politics before in his life, is the #1 target for the Democrat Party. And why? Because we don't back down. Because we stand on truth. So someone told me that, you know, some of these liberal blogs are saying things about me. It doesn't matter. Because when you pick a fight with a soldier, we love it and you get hurt. So we should invite them to the fight. Invite them to the fight because our message is better. Invite them to the fight because limited government, individual responsibility and accountability, our free market, our free enterprise, our traditional cultural values, our strong national security and defense are better than their message of nationalizing production. And that's what you see with the automobile industry, healthcare industry, finance industry, energy sector. It is better than their message and desire to create a welfare state. It is better than their message and their desire to create a social utopia full of social and economic justice. It is better than their message where they are trying to create a secular state here in the United States of America, which is rooted and based in Judeo-Christian faith heritage values. We're better than they are. And what you have to do, just the same as those scared young men who jump from aircraft at 300 to 500 feet into the darkness, the early morning of 6 June 1944. They fought. Wherever they landed, they fought. That's what we need you all to do here in the Bay Area. I don't care about Pete Stark. I don't care about Nancy Pelosi. Fight. Let your voices be heard. Continue to talk about what makes this country great. Not the bureaucratic nanny state, but each and every one of you. And I want to close by saying this simple thing. Never forget that America is not a geographical location. America is an ideal that was born when the first Minuteman answered the call to arms in Lexington and Concord, and has lived in each and every one of us as an American all the way to this day forward. And it is our responsibility to continue the great blessing of passing it on to subsequent generations, because that will be the true test of our greatness and our exceptionalism. Continue to fight, because someday the history books will talk about what you were able to do in November 2010, but more so in November 2012 and preserving that great blessing that came from the pen of Thomas Jefferson back on the 4th of July, 1776. God bless you all and thank you for having me.